until now we've not really looked at nested for loops, but before we talk about nested comprehensions, we're going to have to consider what nested for loops are. So what we're doing here is we're creating a two-dimensional list. So here's the main list called animals and cars, and inside that main list we have two sublists, one of animals and one of cars. That's pretty straightforward. Let's run that so it's available to us. And now what we're going to do here is we're going to create two for loops. One is an external for loop, and the second for loop is nested within that external for loop. In order to understand what's happening here, let's just comment out this second for loop, Control /, and we'll run this first for loop alone and talk about it for a minute. And you'll notice I've taken some pains with the nomenclature to make this kind of human readable. For each list, print each list. This for loop goes into the animal cars loop and it says, okay, what is the first list in here? Well, here it is. Print that. So it prints it. That's the execution of the first loop. Then it breaks out of this for loop, goes back around, and it runs this loop again. And it says, okay, the second list. What's the second list? It's this one, because we already did the first one. And so it prints that out. We have an operation of this for loop twice, and that's why we call it a loop. The problem is that we're still not being able to get to these actual entities within each of these lists. We're stuck outside in the shell, and we can't get to them. How do we get to them? Well, we're going to have to loop through each list specifically, and that's what happens down here, because we want each word in each list. Now, so let's uncomment this, run it, and talk about it. Let me run this. Now, all of this is happening within that first loop. For each list in animal cars, we're going to do all of this. And so the first thing we do is, print each list, and that's this. And once that is printed, then it jumps to this for loop next. And it says, okay, each word now. So we have to go to the cat word. And that's the first word in this second list. And it says, convert it to uppercase and print it. So it does that. So it breaks out of this for loop, and it goes back around and runs this for loop again because there's more words. And it finds the second word, capitalizes it, and prints it out. And it just keeps doing that until it gets to the last one. And then when it says, whoop, there's no more, then what happens? Well, it breaks out of this second for loop, it ends, and it goes back to this first for loop because there's another item in this first for loop. The other item is this second list. So it'll print out that second list, which happens here, and then, well, right here, and then it'll go to this next call, function call, which is to loop again through that list and get each word, right? And it does that 5 times until it's done, keeps looping again and again till it's done, and then it goes back and it says, well, is there another list? No, there's not, so we're finished. That's a nested for loop. With that in mind, let's just look at nested comprehensions now. And in order to understand this, we're going to do all 3 steps. We're going to do the normal for loop without any comprehensions. We're going to do the same operation with a nested for loop, but the outside for loop is going to be normal, and the inside for loop is going to be a comprehension. And in our last example, we're going to go to a full nested comprehension, where we have basically 2 loops running as 2 nested comprehensions. So what we're doing here is we're taking this list, animals and cars, and we're going to ask the question, are there any words with A's in them? And any words with A, we're going to append to this A word list. And so we should get a list of words with only A's in them. Let's run this. We've pulled out all the words that have A's in them. All right, and here we're going to do the same thing for our outside loop. This is a copy of this, right? They're the same. But inside this operation, we're going to do with just a comprehension. And what are we doing? Well, we're saying take a temporary variable and grab all the words that have an O in it and put it inside this name variable. and then extend that O word list with the O word that we found, and then loop again. Let's run this one, and we get our O words. But we're doing something a little more complex here because we're running an if statement as well. And here this if statement comes after our for loop. Our final addition of this operation is to do a complete, fully nested comprehension to accomplish the same thing. This time we're just pulling out all words with a T. So let's run this, and we get each word that has a T in it.